So congratulations from my side. And wow to all of you, because that's such a high-level panel. We heard about statistics and numbers. We heard about the impact from remote working. We heard about all flexibility instruments and the way they went, and now we had some insights from your company. Thank you so much so far. I'm sure there are lots of questions, so I would open up the panel for the audience until you found your way to the mic. I have one question, because you were talking, all of you were talking about how it is, how the impact is, about general things. So now a more personal question to all of you. How has the hybrid work model transformed your respective fields where you're working? And what key opportunities and challenges have you encountered adapting to this new way of working, just in your certain area? We're talking about university and everything else. Who wants to start?
Well, I'm a person who more or less always works at work, actually, because, I have been a leader of a 500 people organization, and as she said, they want to meet me, and I also realized that I can do this mentoring much, much better if I know those people in person. I can't mentor because I do not know those people equally well if I only have Zoom meetings. And more mentorship programs now move on digital encounters. But this doesn't work. I cannot recommend people because I can't get in touch with them. I don't know how they tick, or however you would like to say this. So I used to be at the office, hang around, talk to people, and then close my door and walk in private for a couple of hours. But this is probably the old school, but it also means that I get in touch to many, many different people while walking to work, while getting back to work. And this is something I think which we forget, that our individual preferences have a huge societal impact, because they may decrease trust in each other if we do not meet regularly very, very different people.
And obviously you are meeting expectations, because we learned that the younger generation is expecting to have the boss in the office when they arrive.
So Harvard has a policy of 3 days in the office and 2 days wherever you'd like to work, in the office or elsewhere. And as a manager, my biggest adjustment has been to learn how to manage. And I also think that's a more generalizable point, that when we all were forced to work from home during COVID, managers really weren't prepared. So most surveys report that employees prefer working from home and managers don't like it. And there could be reasons and bad reasons, but one of the reasons certainly is that we haven't learned how to manage people who aren't in the office. And that actually was an adjustment for me too. So for example, I used to have my executive assistant sit in front of my office, and that was lovely. I could spontaneously, come out of my office and say, oh, couldn't you check this? Couldn't you call Y? Couldn't you this or that? So I have become much more organized, respecting her life and her rhythm, and her way of doing things that I really hadn't thought about before. I also manage a bigger team of staff and fellows, and the same for them. That I think I, as a manager, have grown because I have to think more about how I manage.
You're telling that so calm, so you didn't have any emotions while learning how to manage to take all the private responsibilities of your employees into your account?
Could you repeat the question, please?
So you were just telling that you did grow as a manager because you had to deal with all the different interests or
also work schedules.
Boundaries. Yeah, and you were so relaxed, and I guess you never had emotions during that way of growing as a manager?
Oh, I never had trouble, you're saying. No, I did, of course. It wasn't always easy for me to do that. And still today, I'm like, oh my God, she's not in the office. I really do need those copies before I go into the classroom. Of course, there are these moments where I wish somebody was available 24/7 for me. but that's not life, and that's not fairness. So I had to grow also a little bit, just because I had to.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll probably say two things. At EY, as a professional services organization, we follow the client's expectations. So if clients want us to be at their premises, we will always be there. In terms of personal preferences and how it shaped me, I would say I prefer to have a purpose to come into the office and purpose to be with the team. And it's either to create, to celebrate, to mentor, to brainstorm. So there has to be a purpose. And this is, it worked really well with my own team because they know I'm there, I'm quite approachable as a leader, but they would also know that I will not demand for them to be in the office just because I'm there. There has to be a purpose.
Yeah, I would second that. I'm on average in the office 4 days a week if I'm not traveling. One day I work from my home office. What I realized is I personally get a lot of energy out of interacting with people. So that really, if we have a face-to-face meeting also with a larger group, that really energizes me. I also realize that sometimes if you have a group of people together, you get a lot of stuff done, simply because you can just spontaneously talk about things by the water cooler over a cup of coffee and. So there's also some efficiency aspect. At the same time, I also do enjoy some flexibility in having work arrangements. And I think the right approach needs to be to also give more autonomy to the teams to self-organize. And this is why, we have also refrained from these one-size-fits-all policies, because also the type of work that gets done in a company, it's very different if you think of research and development versus marketing and sales and anything in between. So why, have senior management regulate this from the top? Why not give more autonomy to the teams? And I think if you have people with the right mindset, I think they will figure it out, and they will act in the best interest of the company without you having to tell them.
Thank you very much. Yes,
Quickly, because she was referring to the different disciplines we are working in. So what I realized since COVID is that we are getting more and more back to our disciplinary boundaries, so that there are less work being done across disciplines, so across psychology and economics and sociology and political sciences. And this comes about when we eat together, when we juggle around ideas. So this is one of the reasons why. So I have a purpose while being there.
Thank you. Now I see we have the first ladies who wants to ask question. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much for this layered and deep discussion. Actually, my questions will be going to Professor Jutta, because I am also myself a professor of social anthropology, teaching in Istanbul and working on women's labor. My questions will be about the methodology, especially sociological research methods, that how we can reflect to NGOs or to private sector, because I am also an academic advisor for an NGO, trying to create certain models to make women's studies much more deeper and create public policy. And I am very curious that what methods can be much more modifiable for this kind of areas, you think? And for the others as well, of course, they can also add, but Professor Jutta, maybe you can just elaborate more.
I'm really sorry, could you repeat what kind of barriers you are talking about?
I mean, I am talking about the research methods we are using, sociology or anthropology, and how we can modify or reflect to the private sector or NGOs to develop the women's studies themselves.
Yeah. Well, in terms of methods, I really have problems because surveys don't work anymore, really good, because people tend to give answers which they think we expect to hear. So we do more and more experiments, we do more and more observational methods, and we look how people behave, and we look about their medical track and things like this, and there we see that homework, extended homework, really increases stress, and sort of increases the mental load, in particular of women. But this we measure with very, very different methods than those we used 10 years ago.
Thank you very much.
Hello, great conversation here, by the way, everyone. My name is Aida Sabo, and I'm Global Head of Inclusion at Parexel. And I have a question for Heike. I noticed that prior to you coming back to Berlin to work, you were in Japan. And I'd like to have you give us some examples of some of the work you did around gender equity in Japan.
Yeah, thank you. Japan is an interesting place in the world. You know, we all think of Japan as, you know, a very advanced economy. You know, we all have the Japan of the 80s in mind, you know, and when you arrive there, you know, look at the Japanese government. Is it 1 or 2 women in the government by now? You look at all the big companies, there's largely, hardly any women at the helm of any of the companies. So, and in the gender equality index, I think Japan is place 142 out of, I don't know, maybe out of 180 or 160, you know, which is interesting. Now, the interesting thing I saw was there is, if you look at how many women graduate from universities in Japan, the average across all the different subjects is 50%, okay? So you have a equal opportunity in terms of getting good education. Then they enter the workforce. There's 2 big dropout points. First one is getting married. And if you work in a Japanese company as opposed to a multinational company, I can tell you a lot of times your boss will come to you and say, oh, you know, Mrs. Prinz, now that you're married, probably sooner rather than later, you would want to stay at home, right? And that's when, you know, promotions stop. Second dropout point, if you survive that and you still stay, okay, then the second dropout point is first, exactly, you're pregnant with your first child, okay? And then for sure, everybody in that Japanese company is going to expect you to stay at home. Now, I was the head of the multinational company in Japan, and that's a big difference, you know, and I think what we saw was, first of all, on my leadership team, we had like 50% of women. And that did a lot of things, and it was not difficult to find them, and they were promoted to these positions based on merit, okay? I want to be very clear, right? There was no such thing as, oh, let's make sure we have 50-50. They were all promoted based on merit. And that did something really, really important, I think, because in societies like the Japanese, it's important you provide role models so that women really see it is possible. But also, I can tell you, it was an advantage if you wanted to recruit in the local market, because those women, and there are all these well-educated women, and many of them aspire for career and family at the same time, they choose to work rather for a multinational company as opposed to a local company, because they know we provide more flexibility. You know, there's not going to be people who show up and say to you, oh, now that you got married, you know, your career is probably over, and, right? So you can turn this also into a competitive advantage, and thus you can attract really high caliber talent. And by the way, what I also noticed is a lot of the men working for us, especially the younger generation, they also liked working for us rather than for a Japanese company, because they wanted to take care of their kids, you know, and I saw more than once that they said, oh, I'm going to leave the office early because there is whatever, the school competition of my son, and. But I will also say COVID changed a lot of things also to the positive, in a sense that you have this presence culture, and that sort of got reduced a little bit, I must say. But I think there's a lot of work still to be done. And I don't mean to sound judgmental about Japanese society or anything. I'm just describing this because what I also like about it at the same time is, and I think there is a cultural context also to this hybrid work model. I like really the contextual nature of this culture where, you know, you walk into a room and people read the room. And you cannot read a screen to the same extent, okay? And there's a lot of communication that happens in a non-verbal way. And this is why, again, I think having a one-size-fits-all policy about hybrid work arrangements, in my mind, probably doesn't make too much sense. Yeah, you also have to, for instance, see it in the cultural context. But thanks for your question. And as you can tell, I always get passionate when I talk about Japan because I love working and living in Japan, I have to say.
Maybe I can add, I mean, this was amazing, but I just wanted to underline something that you just said, basically double click, I think we say these days. And that is that we cannot underestimate the power of the social norms that you just described, including on men. So nobody knows this, but Japan has the most generous parental leave policy in the world. The most generous parental leave policy. Doesn't discriminate between men and women, so fathers and mothers can take it equally, but only 7% of men are taking it. And they are not taking it maybe because they don't want to take it, but they're also not taking it because they know that they'll be punished for taking it. And they will be punished more so than women because it's so countercultural to take parental leave as a man. So I'm just kind of underlining what you just said. It's so very important for us to think about these cultural constraints that people face who work in our organizations.
Hello, my name is Veronica Romero. I am a master's student at the TU Berlin. And my question is inspired by the presentation of Zhanna. I would like to know more about how to overcome the bias you were talking about, like the productivity and the visibility bias when it comes to working remotely.
Yeah, I think that was a question to me in terms of like the proximity bias. I don't have a perfect solution, I'll be very honest. I think what we're seeing, and again, we as an organization, we have 400,000 employees, right? And we are pretty flexible across the world in terms of how people work. We make an intentional effort. So we basically request our leaders when it comes to making promotion decisions, when it comes to making career progression decisions. We deliberately raise the points about presence and ask the question, actively ask the questions whether the persons working remotely have anything to do with the way you're assessing. I think we have something very similar to what you were describing in terms of the marketplace. We've also introduced it and almost anonymized the marketplace. So you don't see whether it's Mary or Johnny or whether Mary works from home and Johnny works from the office. It's the skills description, the expertise, the industry expertise, so the different skills and the experiences versus the demand for the particular jobs. So when teams, and in particular in consulting, less so in where it requires like technical expertise, like deep technical tax knowledge, for instance. But when it comes to business consulting or technology consulting, it's skills-based. Have we sorted it out completely? For sure not. We still have a lot of biases. And when talking to the different organizations, I think most of them are striving sort of in those directions.
Can I add something quickly? I think first you have to measure. You have to measure whether people who work from home are evaluated differently, significantly differently from people who work in the office, holding everything else constant. So you have to run a multiple regression, which is what you're doing, right? So you have to first diagnose, is there a problem? Secondly, I think what was good, and I think you just mentioned that with the skills-based assessment, it forced many organizations to move beyond presenteeism, right? Is she in front of her computer 12 hours a day, and does she log in, log off 12 hours later? Thinking investment banking, sometimes consulting, and focus more on outputs, which is a very good thing, particularly for women, because as we know, women do better on performance and less well on potential when it comes to promotion decisions, because potential is much more subjective than performance. So I think these are all the good things. And then the final thing I would say is, just because we've just studied this, you know, even the remote organizations, I don't know any single remote organizations, even those that work fully remote, that don't get together. So they get together maybe a week in a quarter, or they get together 2 weeks in half a year. But they do have moments of touch points, because those interactions, you know, where you are face to face, where you have a purpose to actually meet, they are very important even for the remote workers.
Super interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we are already out of time, so I would say one last question, please. Short question, short answer.
That's lucky there's no one behind me. Narelle Hooper from Australia, and thank you for a really interesting discussion and thought-provoking. I'm conscious my mechanic is not able to work from home, but I'm conscious there's a large chunk of society that aren't able to work from home. My question was to delve more into Iris's points about the norms and the power of norms. And it seems we have practices and policies, but unless we shake those norms and re-norm that, things won't shift. I'd like to ask the panel if you have any examples of initiatives or successful re-norming of taking those kind of practices, such as parental leave or other things that advantage both parents. Thanks.
So I'm happy to get us started, but I know other people have lots of experience on norms too. I'm actually going to Australia. Telstra, your telecommunications company, did something very smart, and that's like 10 years ago, when I was actually spending a half a year in Australia. They changed the default of working, meaning you had to justify why you want to be in the office today. And the assumption was you work from home, unless you have a reason to come in. That's a way to change norms, right? That you change the default assumption in this organization. But you also mentioned, I think, a hard problem that I don't think any of us here has a very good answer to, and that is, it is deeply unfair that some people cannot work flexibly. It's just deeply unfair. I mean, nurses, very hard for a nurse to work remotely, although doctors actually increasingly do work remotely, because you now have AI, a computer, doing the surgery much better than the doctor ever could. And the doctor can, in fact, direct the computer from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the surgery takes place here in Berlin. But the unfairness of that, I think, is deep, and honestly, I don't have a good sense, other than, I'm going to end with that, to go back to a point that I made. It's so important for us to also think about those people in our society who could have more control over their schedules if we gave it to them, right? These are service workers, these are your fast food chain workers, these are people who might learn about their shift today for the next 2 months, or even just for the next week. And how can you plan anything in life, you know, let alone daycare, if you don't have control over your time? So I do think we have to try to push this question of control over time very hard, not just for white-collar workers, but for anyone. But Jutta, I know you have done a lot of work on norms.
Well,
so,
my question is very easy. Just go to East Germany. Go to East Germany, there are entirely different gender norms. You know, women are used to work and having children. The tax system has been different for many, many decades, and they still live as if the structures would be different, because the culture continue, the norms of doing both family and work, more or less full-time, very, very different until now, so many decades after reunification. So norms can be changed through structural reforms. Here we still have huge tax benefits if one woman works or if one partner works less than the other. And I could continue with structural barriers, going to half-time schools or the lacking childcare facilities and so on. Change, structures, and culture will follow.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. We could go on, and now we are at the next topic, regulations. But for today, thank you very much for this brilliant panel, for your insights. Give them a big applause, please.